Hi, I'm Phil and I'm a late diagnosed autistic older adult. In this video, I want to chat about whether a formal autism diagnosis is worth it in older age, or indeed at any point as an adult. Before we begin, an important point to note: autism is a spectrum of challenges and abilities. As such, no two autistic people will have the same experience or the same traits. Okay, so first up, why might we seek a diagnosis? We may feel like we don't fit into the world around us. Maybe we have always just been a bit different to our friends and other people we come across. Maybe we've had issues with work or relationships. Research suggests that autistic adults have a higher rate of physical and mental health conditions than the wider population. Autistic people die about 20 years younger due to higher rates of accidents and co-occurring health conditions. Shockingly, autistic people also have a 9-fold risk of suicidality, and subsequently, many autistic people say that their diagnosis literally saved their life. Other reasons why we might seek a diagnosis. Some research suggests accelerated ageing in autistic people compared to the wider population. Autistic people are more likely to have some of the possible risk factors for dementia, such as diabetes, depression, high blood pressure, poor sleep, high cholesterol, and social isolation. On relationships in particular, the implications of not being diagnosed might be relationships that broke unexpectedly, not understanding why you can't find a romantic partner, or having lots of relationships that just don't last, or not being able to commit and subsequently losing good relationships. So let's have a look at what some of the barriers to getting an autism diagnosis might be. Firstly, masking. We are very good at hiding our autistic traits, so other people don't see us as autistic. This can lead to sceptical responses from doctors who only ever see our masked self. You may go to the doc and say, "I think I'm autistic," and they might respond, "Oh, you communicate well, you make good eye contact, so you can't be autistic," or words to that effect. This is changing, however, with GPs getting better information. There is a great article in the Australian Journal of General Practice from March 2021 that addresses this point, titled "Recognising, Supporting and Understanding Autistic Adults in General Practice Settings." I'll leave a link to that in the video description. It's an interesting read. Moving on, we may only think of traditional stereotypes of the small boy obsessed with trains, or non-speaking, or flailing about on the floor in what people see as a tantrum. We may be successful in some areas of our life and have the false belief that autistic people can't be successful. We may have good eye contact. There are many other stereotypes in society of what autism is, and we may just not fit those stereotypes. Also, we may be gaslit by others if we discuss our thoughts about being autistic with them. Comments like, "You're not autistic." Also, the diagnostic criteria for autism requires evidence of symptoms being present in the developmental phase of our life, i.e. childhood. Later in life, we may not have clear memories of our childhood. Parents may no longer be around or may struggle to remember specific details from so long ago. Don't be too discouraged if this appears to be the case. A good diagnostician will most likely be able to probe to get some detail here to satisfy this aspect of the diagnostic process. In my case, I only had very distant memories, and likewise so did my parents. But even that was enough to satisfy the requirement of symptoms being present in childhood. Before committing to a formal diagnostic process, have a discussion with a diagnostician to see if the memories you have from childhood will meet their threshold. At this point, I want to diverge for a moment to talk a little bit about children and diagnosis. Some people don't seek a diagnosis for their children because they don't want a label to be placed upon them. Yes, the autism label can be seen as negative, but labels can be useful in obtaining needed accommodations in schooling, health, and other settings. Likewise, some parents don't tell their children about the diagnosis that they had. When finding out as an adult, some autists are angry at not knowing that they had been diagnosed as children. They feel like their life has been stolen by not being told, and have missed opportunities by not knowing. There are also many positives about finding out you are autistic. They might be self-acceptance and gaining language and knowledge to explain past experiences and events. With this new knowledge, we can adjust our self-expectations, for example, to reduce social demands. But this self-acceptance may come slowly. We may find it beneficial to embrace this new identity. We may also start to heal from complex trauma caused by living in a world not designed for us, and understand why there were so many missed opportunities in life. We may now be able to seek accommodations in the workplace or education. Knowing is clearly better for relationships, but this new understanding can cause grief in our partners and parents, and they may need to go on their own journeys to come to terms with our new identity and what that may mean for them. We can start to understand the reasons for our sensory experiences and make adjustments in our lives to accommodate our differences. For me also, understanding why I have so many routines and rules in my daily existence has been hugely beneficial and has helped Trish understand why I'm like this. These routines can have the potential to cause tensions in relationships, so understanding can help our partners to accept these more quirky parts of us. Other key benefits of finding out we're autistic are relief and reduced stress. Realising we are not just the bad person who always says the wrong thing. Connecting with other autistic people can also be a big benefit. This can be in person through autistic meetup groups, but might also be online through organised chat groups, or even just talking via the comments section of YouTube videos like this. Unmasking, where it's safe to do so, might also be a benefit. Self-understanding and acceptance can also positively affect physical and mental well-being. Another key benefit is starting to understand our meltdowns, shutdowns, and burnout. We may also better understand what motivates and inspires us, and this may create a possibility of focusing future career or interest into these things. What about the possible disadvantages of getting a diagnosis? Well, firstly, there's cost. Depending on what country you live in, the cost of an autism diagnosis may or may not be subsidised. In Australia, for example, children and adolescents can have subsidised diagnosis, but not adults. The average cost being about $1,600. Not everyone can afford the expense of this formal diagnosis. If the primary goal is understanding, you may be able to get an informal psychologist opinion in the context of a therapy consultation. This is not an official diagnosis, so won't count towards legal accommodations, but may still be good from a personal perspective, to back up your own self-identification. Another possible disadvantage is wait time. In the UK, where assessments can be accessed via the NHS, the average wait time is 18 months. Thus, many people choose to access appointments via private providers with a shorter wait time. In Australia, my wait time for diagnosis privately was actually only a few weeks. Another potential problem in seeking a formal diagnosis is the possibility of being misdiagnosed or not receiving a diagnosis. Traditionally, this is a common occurrence, particularly for women or people of different cultural backgrounds who may not fit the stereotypes. Common misdiagnoses include conditions like ADHD, anxiety, personality disorders, schizophrenia, and bipolar. For some people, even the complexity of navigating the health system might be enough to discourage getting a diagnosis. A question many older adults may ask themselves is, am I too old for a diagnosis? I would argue that a diagnosis can help at any age. Living undiagnosed is challenging, and there was no possibility of a diagnosis when we were children. The understanding of autism was not sufficiently developed back then. Masking for the whole of life has implications such as depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. At any age, diagnosis brings opportunity to get targeted support. By understanding our autism, we can explain our experiences to friends and family. This may also help other family members identify their autism. Autism is genetic. It runs in families. Someone has to be the first in the family to identify as autistic. Then others may gain the confidence to explore their autism. One really important point to make here, however, is that self-identification is valid. It does not need to be a formal diagnosis, but a formal diagnosis does help dispel our imposter syndrome, which also helps when telling people about our autism. It shouldn't, but it does. It also helps with self-confidence, especially if you encounter deniers. As mentioned earlier, diagnosis can be expensive, so it's worth spending the time to find the right person to diagnose you. Before booking, ask the question, are they experienced in diagnosing autism in high-masking adults in your age bracket? If not, move on to the next option. There are different diagnostic tools that the diagnostician can use, and some of these are more appropriate to adults than others. I've heard stories of adults being asked to draw pictures or play with blocks or something similar in a diagnosis, but this was not my experience. The tool that was used in my diagnosis was the MIGDAS-2, which is the Monteiro Interview Guidelines for Diagnosing Autism Spectrum 2nd edition, which, as the name suggests, is based around a chat with the assessor. It was very respectful and a gentle process. Do the work prior to the diagnosis. Don't just turn up and expect it to go well. The more relevant info you can give the diagnostician, the better. I found it really useful to watch lots of YouTube videos of late diagnosed autistic adults and take notes of the traits they talk about that I related to. When doing this, take your time and be detailed. It took me about 9 months to complete this step in my journey, and I was working on it almost every day during this time. This may be overkill, but detail is good. It may be worth having an appointment with the diagnostician to present your information before the actual diagnostic appointments to see if they think the outcome will be positive. If not, bail before spending the money on the full diagnosis. Then you can decide whether to try again with someone else or whether to just accept that it may not be autism. There are two options if you are not successful in getting the desired outcome of an autism diagnosis. Either you're not autistic, or their diagnosis is wrong and you are autistic. Option 1, you are not autistic. While this might be incredibly disappointing if you truly believed you are autistic, it might be that other factors are involved that mean it looks like autism. This might mean you get a diagnosis of something else like ADHD, bipolar, or borderline personality disorder. While this might not have been the desired outcome, it still gives the possibility to explain things about you and be able to seek helpful support. This can still be a really positive outcome. Option 2, the diagnosis is wrong. Back in 2010, I sought a diagnosis for Asperger's syndrome, which is what Autism Level 1 was then commonly referred to. I was denied that diagnosis because I made eye contact, had a stable job and a uni degree. I was then completely embarrassed and subsequently buried the idea of autism for more than a decade. Thankfully, I found a much more competent person to diagnose me the second time around. This historically has been an incredibly common experience for late diagnosed autistic adults in being denied a diagnosis the first time. If you get a non-diagnosis and you believe that diagnosis to be wrong, then don't give up. If you've done the work on yourself and believe you are autistic, you quite possibly are. So when ready, find someone else and try again. Now, this is easily said, though spending the money the second time might be beyond most people. But what I would at least do is find a different professional to talk with about this and get a different perspective on it. It might be at this point a more informal opinion might be the way to go from a cost perspective and also even from a self-preservation angle. It took me 13 years to try again, and I was very nervous about being denied a second time until I found the right psychologist where my trust was restored. This trust meant I felt I could accept whatever the outcome would be. After receiving a formal diagnosis, or even just identifying yourself as autistic, it is common to experience a range of emotions. Grief, what was lost, opportunities missed, broken relationships, etc. Anger, why was this not picked up earlier? Or why did I not seek this earlier? Shock, is this really me? Am I really autistic? Confusion, what do I do now? Who do I tell? Will my family and friends accept this? You may struggle with mental health for a period of time while you process everything. It may be useful to seek support from a professional to help work through all of the above. In last week's video, I talked about these points from my perspective after I received my diagnosis. In summing up, for me the diagnosis was definitely worth it. I would have always doubted myself without it. There is grief in what has been lost in life because of not being diagnosed earlier, but it has been life-changing. Without a doubt, one of the most defining moments of my life. It may take some research to find the right person to diagnose adults, but that work is worthwhile. Your doctor may have some suggestions, but ultimately it's up to you to decide who to see. Don't let age alone be the reason not to get a diagnosis. It's worthwhile at any age. If you decide not to seek a formal diagnosis, but the process has still led you to the conclusion you are autistic, then that in itself is a great outcome. Be confident in your self-evaluation. The autistic community will support and accept you in that self-understanding. Tell people if you want to, or keep it to yourself. But be open to experience the self-acceptance of that understanding. At the end of the day, it's no one else's business but yours. Okay, so that's it for now. If you want to find out more about what autism is, what it isn't, and why I decided to get an official autism diagnosis, please feel free to check out my two-part video of my introduction to autism. I will leave a link to that in the video description. And remember, if you want to see more videos on my experience with autism, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Feel free to say hi in the comments section or make suggestions about topics for future videos. I would love to hear from you. Or feel free to contact me directly by email at autisticolderadult@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. See you next time.